In our previous lecture, we learned a little bit about blood and how important it is for human bodies and for all animal bodies. Today, we're going to learn a little bit more about the details of how it transports oxygen. We said last time that hemoglobin is the protein that's responsible for bringing oxygen from the lungs to the rest of the tissues. Um, we also learned that it is what gives red blood cells their bright red color. Now, it turns out that hemoglobin loves oxygen when it's in the lungs and when the concentration of oxygen is high. But when it gets to the tissue, it's almost like it hates oxygen. It just spits it out. And that's really good because the body doesn't have to wait very long for oxygen to be released. If you ever stick a bag of tea in hot water, you know that it takes a little while for the tea flavor and color to fill the whole cup of water. And you don't have that amount of time when the blood is running from your lungs to the tissue and back again. It needs to happen instantly. So how does that work? Well, hemoglobin is actually 4 different identical subunits. And each of those subunits can bind one oxygen molecule. When one binds one side of the 4 pieces, it sends a trigger to the other 3 that it really wants to have oxygen in a major way, very tightly. Now that's good because it pulls it on, but what if the hemoglobin stayed in that oxygen-loving state? When it got to the tissues, it wouldn't want to let go of the oxygen. It wouldn't say, hey, here's some oxygen for you. Well, the nice thing is that when just one of the 4 loses the oxygen, the other 3 decide that they don't want the oxygen either, and they all burst off. So this effect really speeds up the transport of oxygen from the lungs to the tissue. It actually has a name for it, and that's called allosteric action, or allostery. So I'm going to ask you to do a little mental activity that helps you understand allosteric action. Think about a device, maybe a mechanical device you have around your house, where activity in one part is triggered by motion in another part. Okay? How does that work? How does the signal get from the first part to the second part? When you pull a trigger, when you flip a switch, there's mechanical pieces, right, inside of there. Well, how do proteins get it done? They do it mechanically as well. So there are actual physical rotations in hemoglobin that allow the one subunit that bound the oxygen to talk to the 3 that haven't yet bound the oxygen. Now, can you think about why it might be important that there are these mechanical motions? Well, there's a number of reasons. It works out really well inside of the cell because there can't be somebody verbally saying, hey, let go of your oxygen. There's nobody at that level to talk. So these have to be physical motions for it to actually work inside of the cell. Now, a story that goes along with this whole idea of myoglobin, hemoglobin, all the things that bind oxygen is the story of how we first learned what myoglobin and hemoglobin looked like. In the early days of molecular biology, people were just beginning to use something called X-ray crystallography to understand the very detailed structure of molecular systems. And myoglobin is a very plentiful protein. It's plentiful in sperm whale blood, for example, and so it could be collected and purified to very high degree. And that's what you need to make crystals. Just think about maybe when you made a crystal of sugar or rock candy hanging from a string. You have to have pure sugar in order for that to work because the crystal is made of pure substance. That's why it can build such a nice shape because each building block is exactly the same. So myoglobin had to be very pure, and they had a plentiful source of it, and it was also very soluble in water and pretty hard, pretty firm, and able to stack one brick on top of each other. Well, the big surprise, once they finally got the crystal made and shined the X-rays through it and interpreted all the different little spots, was that the amino acid chain in myoglobin wasn't arranged nice and symmetrically and geometrically like something out of a geodesic dome or Tinker Toys or Lego building blocks, everything at nice right angles or some kind of hexagon shape. Instead, it kind of looked like somebody's intestines, and that was surprising to people. But now we're used to it, and we understand that the amino acid chain, as it folds up into a shape, can be whatever it wants to be in order to get the job done. And that's the kind of stuff you learn in biology. You learn to be surprised, and you learn that it's okay to be surprised. Now, if you're going a little deeper, you should read the leaf, How Do Red Blood Cells Transport Oxygen and Carbon Dioxide? Many people don't realize that the blood is responsible for bringing the carbon dioxide out of the tissue. You should also review the leaf about how oxygen and carbon dioxides are exchanged in the lungs.